Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of 4 debates between hopefuls for the Vermont House of Representatives. My name is Tommy Gardner. I'm the editor of the news editor of the News and Citizen Story Porter. Joining me in moderating this evening's debate is managing editor Jesse Ferron. This debate tonight is between the 4 people running for the 2 available seats in the Lamoille-2 House district, which represents Belvidere, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Wolcott. We have 1 incumbent in the race, Dan Noyes, a Democrat from Wolcott. We also have Republican candidate Richard Bailey of Hyde Park, Democrat Kate Donnally, also of Hyde Park, and Republican Shayne Spence of Johnson. Tonight's debate is being live streamed on the News and Citizen Facebook page, as well for our paper for future viewing for anybody who misses it live tonight. The debate will proceed as follows. First, the candidates will present their opening statements. Then we'll have a number of questions from the moderators, interspersed by 2 rounds in which the candidates get to ask each other some questions. At the end, candidates will have brief closing statements and we'll be on our way. To start off, we'll go alphabetically by last name for the opening statements, and then we'll rotate who goes first as we move through the questions. And at the end, closing statements will be done in reverse alphabetical order. Any rebuttals or follow-ups will be up to the discretion of the moderators, so please keep to the time limits, as we do have a second debate scheduled right after this one. So, does everybody understand the ground rules? Okay.
And that time limit is 2 minutes each. So without further ado, let's hear from the candidates. You'll each have, like I said, 2 minutes for your opening statements, and we will begin with Richard.
Welcome, Kate, Dan, and Shayne. Thank you, voters, family, friends, and guests for watching tonight's Lamoille-2 House debate. Thanks to the News and Citizen, Tommy Gardner, and Jesse for hosting. My name is Richard Bailey from Hyde Park. I am running as a Republican for one of the 2 Vermont House seats in Lamoille-2, which includes Belvidere, Hyde Park, Johnson, Wolcott, and I ask for your vote and support on November 3rd. I want to begin by saying thanks to Governor Scott and his team for their rock-solid leadership during this pandemic. Many thanks to all frontline workers in healthcare, grocery store clerks, truck drivers, farmers, clerks at mini-mart gas stations, pharmacies, law enforcement, Vermont National Guard, newspapers, TV stations, and all other essential businesses which stayed open during our lockdown. Your work and services helped us survive, as many of us were staying home during the pandemic lockdown. Vermont state government and finances are going to be in tough shape because of the pandemic. We need to get the economy opened safely and completely. The legislature needs more balance. My candidacy offers this balance. I will work in spending, lowering taxes, removing burdensome regulations, which slows economic. Once again, I'd like to ask for your vote on November 3rd, and thanks for listening.
All right, thank you. Kate, you're next.
Hey, how's it going? You able to hear me okay?
Yes.
You can.
Cool. Hi, I'm Kate Donnally. Thanks you guys for pulling this together and giving us an opportunity to connect. I am a born and raised Vermonter. I'm a parent of 2 young children, a social worker and a therapist, and a small business owner in the community. And about midway through May of this year, this campaign was not on my radar. My wife and I were neck deep in COVID absurdity of trying to manage 2 full-time jobs and 2 young kids at home without any childcare. And we got a phone call and was asked if I would run. And despite all the many reasons that it might have made rational sense to say no, we said yes. And we said yes for a few reasons. Primarily, we thought about where we're at right now and what's needed right now. There are so many massive, pressing, complex issues that we're facing as a community, as a state. And more than anything, we feel like what's needed right now is a very specific skill set that our leadership should have, specifically the ability to build connection, build coalition, to be able to work together towards common goals while always centering the needs of the most vulnerable and marginalized in our communities. And we don't just need that for the state as a whole, that leadership, although we do, but we desperately need it in our specific district. There's so many immediately pressing issues, from the Vermont State College system to internet to addiction issues, affordable housing, that are going to be pressing in the next 2 years, and we need effective leadership. And as a social worker and a therapist, that's really what I've spent my professional life doing, is building coalitions, building relationships, and moving communities forward towards common goals. We're going to spend a lot of time tonight talking about opinions, and opinions are really important. They are. But I feel like more than opinionated leadership, what we need right now is really effective leadership. And I believe I have the skill set that can allow our community to come together and to move forward towards a thriving future. So I ask for your vote, and thank you again for having me on.
Okay, thank you. Dan, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Tommy and Jesse and the News and Citizen for hosting this debate. I'm humbled to have served as the representative to Montpelier for the past 4 years. It has truly been an honor. A little history about myself. I worked at Parker & Stearns while going to NVU, then Johnson State College, where I received my degree in environmental science in 1989. Amy and I bought our first house up in the Garfield in 93, and both our children were born at Copley Hospital. We moved to Wolcott in 2001. Currently, I work as the director of a nonprofit that engages communities in the service of others, with a focus on Meals on Wheels, companionship, and exercise programs. I currently serve on the board of directors for Copley Hospital, the Vermont Commission on Alzheimer's, and the Vermont Commission on National Community Service. Over the past 4 years, I have served on the Human Services Committee, where I've worked across party lines to champion legislation to make sure Vermont is the best place to grow old in. In fact, a bill I co-sponsored, the Older Vermonters Act, was signed into law Monday evening. 3 years ago, I started the Older Vermonters Caucus with Teresa Wood of Waterbury. This caucus has brought together legislators with a common interest of making sure the needs of older Vermonters, do not fall through the cracks, and agencies like Home Health are adequately funded and able to pay their employees competitive wages. This session, I introduced legislation that passed the House, creating the Office of the Child Advocate. This legislation holds DCF accountable and makes sure that youth in foster care have the supports they need to transition to adulthood. In committee, we took steps to make sure that providers, childcare providers and parent-child centers had the resources they need to make sure children are safe and cared for during COVID. This legislation will not be an easy one. The effects of COVID will deeply affect our small businesses. Sorry, my screen just went blank. And revenue projections are not good. Demand for services will be up. I believe that I have the background, the connections, the creativity to see our rural community through these uncertain times. I ask for your vote, and as always, please reach out to me if you have any questions of my candidacy or state government. Thank you.
Thank you. And Shayne, your turn.
Great, thanks. Thank you to News and Citizen and to our moderators tonight for giving us the chance to be here tonight. I'm Shayne Spence. I'm one of the 2 Republican candidates for the Vermont House in Lamoille-2 district. One of the main reasons I decided to run for office this year is because I'm a young person in Vermont, 27 years old, and we are rapidly becoming an endangered species. Our demographic challenges in this state are severe, and if they're not addressed soon, our state's economy is soon not going to be able to support all of the necessary state services we provide. We need elected leaders with a focus on growing the economy and supporting the creation of good, high-paying jobs in our rural areas. This means saying no to increased taxes because Vermonters are tapped out, and it means reducing regulations and red tape that prevent Vermonters from putting their skills to use in the market. I'm also running because I'm a person in recovery from substance use, and because I have seen too many of my friends fall victim to the opiate epidemic that we have been fighting for years. Part of the reason we have been unable to get this crisis under control is because for too long, we have had people who do not truly understand the experiences of people with substance use disorder making decisions on their behalf. If I'm elected, I would be the only legislator in either body who is openly in recovery, and I would be happy to be a voice for this community that has too often been left out of the conversation. Vermonters in recovery need to know they can get better and that they will be accepted back into society as they embark on their recovery journey. I hope my campaign can help to reduce some of that stigma that so many of us in recovery face. I'm glad to have the chance to speak with voters tonight and share with them why I think I would be an effective representative on their behalf. If you want any more information, please check out my website at www.shaynespence.com and feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have. And I would appreciate your vote on November 3rd or anytime before then. Thanks.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Right, folks, now on to questions from us. You'll each have 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes to answer our questions, and we will start with Kate Donnally. Kate, how do you feel the legislature did handling the COVID-19 crisis, and what would you have done differently?
A good question. In terms of how they did, I think the legislature has done a commendable job given everything that the state has been through since essentially March of this year. They were able to make their way through the legislative session, which was a marathon session, just being in proximity to folks in the legislature. I have such deep appreciation and respect for what they have put in over the last few months. Thank you, Dan. And they were able to make it through without any major cuts to essential programming, and they were able to make it through without any significant, any tax increases to cover the cost. Which I think, again, is remarkable. I think it was also aided by federal aid, and it's part of what's concerning about the coming years. We just don't know what the economy is going to look like. In terms of what I would have done differently, and I apologize, I didn't start my own timer, so you might have to cut me off if you need to. I'm a parent of 2 young kids, and the financial and emotional pressures that families and working families are under right now is incredible. Being asked to pay full childcare costs for a stretch of time for children who would otherwise be in public school. It's essentially over a mortgage a month to cover that cost. And there's been no financial support to the subset of people who often are, working families. To cover that cost, which, obviously childcare has been a massive issue pre-COVID, and this just exacerbated that. And so I think moving forward, that's one of the areas that I would want to focus on, is ensuring that we have financial supports for working families who are really suffering right now.
Dan Noyes, how do you feel the legislature did during handling the COVID-19 crisis, and what would you have done differently?
So I think they did a great job with figuring out how to use the federal funds that came in, especially around our state college system, being able to take money that was out of the general fund that would have been used for the Department of Health and the Department of Public Safety, and shift that $23 million into our state college system to make sure it has the financial ability to stay viable through this time was brilliant. That was the Appropriations Committee. I thought they did a great job on that. Commerce Committee did really well, also trying to get money out to small businesses. A lot of it was really working with our legislative council around what we could spend the money on and what we couldn't. So as guidance came out from the feds, we were able to make sure that the money got allocated where it was possible. A lot of times this was hung up. A lot of the Fed money was really tied to certain uses, and the worst thing that could happen would be if we spent $20 or $30 million on something that was deemed not eligible, and we have to give that money back because we don't have it. A couple of things I think that I might have done different is just figured out how to get the word out about what we were doing and the processes. It was really hard. Even being in the room, trying to figure out what the different committees were doing, especially when we're working over Zoom. But I think in the end, we did a pretty good job about getting that passed. We really focused in on the needs of Vermonters, especially in my committee. And so, yeah, thank you.
Dan. Shayne Spence, how do you feel the legislature did handling the COVID-19 crisis, and what would you have done differently?
I'll actually agree with the previous two and say that I think they did a pretty commendable job. They were given an almost impossible task In normal budget years, they have quite a lot of challenges making ends meet. And this year was that on steroids. So I definitely want to commend every legislator for the work they did, especially, the work getting money to the state colleges. I am a little bit worried that some of the decisions that were made in order to put funding into all the right places right now are decisions that are going to force more difficult decisions down the line. And I do worry, what's going to happen when we don't have all of the federal money coming in and buoying our state budget the way we had. But as far as what I would do different, I think the big thing is process. There were state legislators who, because of their poor internet connection at their house, they were not able to engage with the legislative process as fully as they normally do. If state legislators are having that problem, then we know that voters and constituents are having that problem as well. And, they didn't really have much of a choice, but for the legislature to be conducting business in the way that they did, where there are so many people who cannot engage in the process as they should be able to in a democratic society, I think is deeply problematic and raises some serious questions about some of the things that happened this year. But aside from that, I think, the budgetary work they did was commendable.
Thank you, Shayne. Richard Bailey, how do you feel the legislature did handling the COVID-19 crisis, and what would you have done differently?
Well, I would have to say that they did a very good job about getting the budget passed with what restrictions they had with the federal money. And we are just thinking that we are pushing a lot of these money issues down the road, and come the next budget year, we're going to have some serious problems. What I would do different, I'm thinking that what Kate's saying about the child care issue, that you would have thought that some of that money could have been gone to help that industry out a little bit, maybe a little bit sooner. But basically, as long as we're not getting any tax increases this year, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next up.
My question. So for mine, we're going to start with Dan. And the question is, what are your thoughts about voting by mail? Should this become an option for voters in future elections?
Sorry, who starts? Me?
You, yep.
Oh, sorry, a little glitch there. We've always had vote by mail here in Vermont. I think it's especially during these times with COVID, I think it's a really good idea to not put our town clerks and their staff at risk. I have a lot of trust in our systems to make sure that it works and that people's votes are counted. I think we should continue with vote by mail. And yes.
Okay, thank you. Shayne, you're next.
I support a vote by mail system. As Dan said, we've had absentee voting for a long time, and you didn't need to have a reason really to do it. You could just do it absentee if that was what was more convenient for you. I myself have always voted early. And that's something that I think a lot of Vermonters do, is they, whenever it's convenient for them to go into the polling to their town clerk's office and do their democratic duty at that time. But I think there are concerns with the way we've rolled out our vote by mail program this year. And the approach of doing it in the way we have for the general election, where we just send a ballot to every single voter on the checklist, I think definitely raises some concerns, especially in a town like Johnson, where there's a lot of people who are on the checklist here that maybe lived here a few years ago when they were going to school, but they don't live here anymore. And it's very, very difficult to expect every town clerk to know every single person that has gone in and out of their town and be able to remove that person from their checklist. So I thought that the approach taken in the primary election was a good one, where we sent out a postcard, an absentee ballot form to every single registered voter. And that way, if they were actually still there and they wanted to vote, vote, they could request the ballot and get it that way. But as for going forward, I think, yes, we should have a vote by mail system. And, as soon as we get the technology and the security infrastructure in place, we should have a vote online system as well.
Okay, thank you. Richard.
Yes, the current system that the state of Vermont had with the absentee ballot is been in place for many, many years. I've used absentee ballot for the last 3 or 4 elections. Seems to have worked well for me. I would tend to agree with Shayne. I'm not sure that mailing out ballots to everybody on a checklist is a good idea, but mailing out a postcard like they did in the primary, I would tend to agree would be a little more safer than having all these ballots floating around out there. And we have done, and I don't have a problem with mailing the ballot, but I think the voter should request it, not just blanketly sending it out to everybody on the checklist.
Okay, thank you. And Kate.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, first off, I just want to send a massive shout out to every town clerk across the state of Vermont for this election cycle. I just can't imagine the level of work that they've had to put in. I know I was writing handwritten postcards to people who requested, ballots early in the primary, and I had written over 800 within the first couple of weeks. It was just an incredible turnout. And to me, that's really good news. I think in a democracy, we have to do everything in our power to ensure that people have access to voting. And, this is a new experiment in many different ways. Obviously, mail-in ballots have been around for a long time. Conducting mail-in voting at this scale is new and different. And I think, at least for our state, there are many states that have it in place and have for a long time. I think we have some really good models to look at. And so, like anything else, anytime you're doing something, rolling it out like that, and the pressures are so intense with a election riding on it, I think we need to always be open to looking at what's working and what's not working. But to me, the fundamental issue is ensuring that we make voting as easily accessible to every person as possible. And in that respect, I think mail-in voting is, from an equity perspective, a really important thing.
So now we would like to give everyone the opportunity to ask one of your opponents a question. And please remember to ask it in the form of a question. And we will give your opponent 90 seconds to answer. So we're going to start that with Shayne. Choose your opponent, choose your question.
Yeah, my first question is for Dan. So Dan, taking a look at your voting record over the years, I noticed that you have voted with your party leadership 85% of the time. Your leader, Jill Krawinski, is from Burlington and, represents a very different district than you do. So I wanted to ask, do you feel as if you are representing the rural district that you represent when you are voting in line with your party leadership 85% of the time?
Hey, Shayne, thanks for the question. Yes, I do. I feel that specifically the votes when I go against, I guess, the leadership or the committee of jurisdiction on a particular bill, I am looking at it as to how that bill would affect the residents of our community. And I listen to both sides, and I read the bill, look at it, and make a decision if it's the best thing, if it's going to help people in Lamoille County, or if it's going to hurt them. And I make that decision to vote based on how I feel it will help our community. And sometimes that's with the committee of jurisdiction, and sometimes it's against them. Thank you.
All right, Richard, you're up.
Thank you. This question's for Kate. You've gotten a lot of support from progressives from around the country and around the district, and there are a lot of Democrats in the districts wondering whether you are a Democrat or a progressive. Could you please clarify?
Sure. I mean, I'm running as a Democrat. I don't know if there's anything else in particular that you're curious to know about my party affiliation, or.
Richard, would you like to reframe the question, Richard?
Just a lot of your out-of-state contributions are from very progressive folks, and I'm curious why they're supporting you with all that kind of money versus that it just seems like you're more of a progressive than a Democrat.
Yeah, I'm running as a Democrat. I'm not sure who you're referring to in terms of out-of-state contributions. I mean, I'm happy to answer for any particular person if you have someone in particular. But I mean, I guess my simple answer is I'm running as a Democrat.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Kate, your turn for a question.
Sure. My question is for Dan. Dan, you and I have spent a lot of time together over the last couple of months. It's been a really educational experience to be able to campaign alongside you. And one of the things that stands out to me when we have been going through the community is how much broad support you have within the community, and specifically support across party lines. There's a lot of people that walk up to us when I'm with Dan and say, Dan has my vote, even though I might not typically vote democratically. And I'm just curious, Dan, to hear a little bit from your perspective about what has allowed you to be able to build that kind of support, something that has been really challenging for politicians during this particular political time, to build that sort of cross ideological spectrum, to build that coalition across ideological spectrums.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think it has a lot to do with about being present and being a good listener and being out in the community. I go to pretty much every event and make myself available to select boards and planning commissions and DRBs, and really try to be out there listening to the voters, listening to my neighbors, and really having the conversations with them about what it is that Montpelier can be, what we should be doing in Montpelier. And I think that attributes to sometimes why I don't vote with the committee of jurisdiction or the party. I just, really try to hear what my constituents are telling me, and I mainly just am present. I like trying to go out every night. This, now I'm trying to do it on Zoom, but, in the past, for the past 4 years, I really just go to everything I possibly can. Tuesday Night Live, Wednesday Night Live. I go up to, in Morrisville, I go up to, the Wolcott planning commission meetings or select board meetings, and listen to them and really think about what they're struggling with in their communities, and just try to work with them, whether in the meetings, or circle back with any of their questions on how they're dealing with state government, or individuals, like a lot of people that had issues with unemployment. I was at a 2-minute right there, Tommy. I thought I heard something. Sorry. Just trying to be respectful. So yeah, I mean, people can call me up, and I try to make myself very accessible on any issue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and Dan, your turn for a question.
My question is for Richard. Richard, how would you represent me in Montpelier if you were to have been elected, if you are elected?
Well, my first thing would be to try to make sure that you keep more of your money by not raising taxes and overspending the state budget. We have big concerns down there regarding overspending, and all this is just making it difficult for everybody to survive in this state with increased taxes on local level. It's I think that by reining in some of the spending and reshifting of some of the priorities might help represent you a little bit better than how you've been voting for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. All right, back to us. We will start this second round of questions from the moderators with Richard Bailey. Richard, the legislature agreed to provide enough funding to keep the Vermont state colleges open for another year. But after that, the future of Northern Vermont University and the other state colleges remains murky. How important is the state college system to you, and what is the legislature's role in its future? 2 minutes.
Well, we have a college system that the small towns, we need to keep these colleges in the small towns, but they need to stay viable. And there's a lot that needs to be done, and we need to think outside the box. I want to keep those colleges in the small towns. We need to keep their economic engines for those towns. So we've got to figure out a way to get everybody at the table to look at all options, be it tuition, figuring out the tuition issue, pay, benefits, and figure out how we're going to get these colleges so that they can get the students they need there to help survive the system. I am interested in trying to make sure that if UVM and Chittenden County are an economic engine in themselves, and I think I would be looking at taking some of their funding and transferring it to some of the state colleges. But again, there's a lot of out of the box thinking that needs to be done. We just can't go down the same path the colleges have been going down. There's concern for looking how we can use these facilities in different manners. And so that's basically, I want to try to keep them there as long as we can, as long as they're viable. We need to make sure they're viable and not increasing taxes on Vermonters to keep them viable.
Thank you, Richard. Kate Donnally, how important is the state college system to you, and what is the legislature's role in its future?
The state college system is incredibly important to me and to the community. You know, I've said throughout the course of this campaign that in order for, we have to build thriving, sustainable communities. We have to build a space where those who are born here and those who move here can sustainably stay here. But we need people to do more than stay in our community. We need people to be engaged. You know, if there's anything this campaign has shown me in engaging with the community, is our communities run on passionate and committed community members who volunteer their time and energy and skills to make our communities run. We need people in our communities with skill sets. The future economy and vibrancy of our state depends on the Vermont State College system. So it's essential. In terms of the role that Vermont should play, I think it's well established that the percentage of revenue coming in to the Vermont State College system from the state is very low, and it feels notable given where we're at financially right now, potentially, you know, in the midst of a cusp of a recession, that historically when we, not just us, but nationally, when we're in periods of recession is when state college systems have taken the greatest hit. Like if you go back before, you know, 2008 recession, I think it was 30% was like the revenue stream that Vermont was contributing to the Vermont State College system. And now here we are. And so one thing I think we have to really focus on is figuring out how to move through these next couple of years without continuing to use the Vermont State College system as a place to pull money from.
15 seconds.
But sorry, say that again.
15 seconds.
The last thing I'll say, in addition to money, when you talk to anyone about the state college system right now, across every sector, there's frustration and mistrust. And I think one thing we have to focus on in addition to money is building a cross-coalition leadership group that includes all invested parties to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all campuses and all people involved.
Thank you. Is 15 seconds a good enough warning for everybody, or should I give you more like 20 or 25? I mean, let me know what is, if, and I can give you more like 20 if that helps you kind of get to an end. So
20 is good for me.
Cool, I'll do that. All right, Dan Noyes, how important is the state college system to you, and what is the legislature's role in its future?
It's very important. I think that having NVU Johnson in the town of Johnson is a huge economic driver, not only for Johnson, but for Lamoille County. It's important to bring young people here. It's important to bring diversity. It gives access to our youth that want to continue their education, as well as older adults. Some things I would do to keep, I mean, we're definitely going to be in the future moving forward. It's going to be a struggle. It's, you know, the money projections are not like what we're seeing right now, where we're able to use federal money, 23 million, to make sure that they were going to make it through the next year. Some of the things that I would recommend doing is moving the buildings out of the state college system into building and general services. They're actually more adapt to maintenance of buildings and being a lot more focused on having an education that people want. The other thing I would do is I would match the AmeriCorps Service Award at our state colleges. I've introduced legislation to do this. And what that would do is bring in federal dollars into our state college system for people who move to Vermont, serve in Vermont, and go to our state college system. This is just a way to tap into some money, and also to allow to bring people to our community who will serve here. The other thing that if it was moved into the building and general services, that would actually move the budget into the capital budget. I would make sure that we apply for Northern Borders grants to maintain our buildings in Johnson and in Linden. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And Shayne Spence.
Thanks for the
What is
question.
the state college system to you, and what is the role of the legislature in its future?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It is a very important one, and the state college system is very important to me and to everyone who lives in rural Vermont, especially in this northeastern part of it. The NVU alone, just as a quick little tidbit, puts in $113 million of economic activity to the northern tier of Vermont every single year. That's with an investment of state dollars of a little over $11 million. It might be a little bit different this year due to all the federal money coming in, but that is a massive return on investment, and it is well worth the money that we're putting into it. I was happy to be the first person to sign the VSCS Thrive pledge to fight for doubling funding for the Vermont State College system. As Richard has noted, I think a great first place for us to look at that is at UVM and looking at ways that we can distribute some of their funding for their medical program and for their agricultural programs around the state, where there is a great need for medical workers and a great need for agricultural training. So we can match our needs with the funding that we are already using and concentrating mostly in Chittenden County, where, again, as Richard said, they have other economic drivers. We don't out here. So we need to fight for this. Absolutely. Another area I think we could look at is using our footprint better, using the buildings that already exist on college campuses to house, well, first off, CCV would be a great thing. If we can move CCV offices onto college campuses, we will encourage. All right, we'll encourage those students to matriculate into four-year degrees more often. The next place I would look is at state office buildings, where, you know, a lot of those the things they're working on are things that they can work a lot more effectively with if they've got a whole pool of college students there to help them out. So I think it's something we got to focus on.
Thank you, Shayne.
My question. Protests and discussions about racial justice have dominated much of the last half year, both nationwide and locally, especially in Johnson. What are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement, and how do you see your role in, and how do you see your role in the race mattering to Vermont? So we're going to start my question with Kate.
Hey, thanks for the question. I think it's a really important one. And, you know, I think aside from COVID, I really think that for some municipal governments right now, this is the area that they're spending the most sort of time and energy on. And in talking to people in the community, it's a lot. It's incredibly challenging. And, you know, I can tell you in terms of the community as a whole, when it comes to racism, people in our community are suffering. No matter what numbers you look at, whether you're looking at young people of color in our local schools, whether you're looking at adults living in our state, whether you're looking at people who are on the village board of trustees or the select board, people right now are suffering. And we need to acknowledge that talking about and addressing issues of race and racism is a very specific skill set. And right now, more than anything, we need leaders who have that skill set, who are able to talk about race in a knowledgeable and understanding way, who are able to engage broad coalitions of people to be able to work towards an anti-racist future where everyone in our community has access to safety and equity and joy and opportunity, which just isn't true right now. We do not have equitable access to these things right now. And this is an area that I think I really bring to the table. I've spent the last few years working really closely with a great group of people in the community to develop the Racial Equity Alliance of Lamoille. I have been co-chairing their Real Schools Coalition and have had success in building a coalition together among youth. We have a youth coalition now. We have a coalition of people, parents, interested parties in the community who not only have we been able to build that coalition, but also have been able to effectively bring both supervisory unions to the table to engage in important conversation about how to move forward. And that is the kind of skill set that we need our leaders to have right now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm not as good of a timekeeper as Tommy. I'll try to give you the 20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, next up is Dan. So what is your thought on Black Lives Matter, and how do you see race mattering in Vermont?
So we started to do some work in the legislature on how our policing is rolled out in Vermont, and we definitely, that will be continuing, I believe, when we return. You know, I support Black Lives Matter. Definitely, I pulled up the mission for them, and a decentralized political and social movement advocating for non-violent civil disobedience in protest against police brutality. And, you know, I definitely support it. I definitely think that we have work to do both locally and at the state level. And I'm ready to help any way I can. Thank you.
I didn't have to give you the warning. Shayne Spence, you're next. What's your position on the Black Lives Matter movement, and how does race matter to Vermont?
Well, first off, Black Lives Matter. That is, I think a very obvious statement to make. And we absolutely need to pursue fundamental criminal justice and policing reform in this state and in this country. I think we've done a lot of good work here in Vermont and made some progress, but I don't think that work is done. But I also want to say, none of this means that all police officers are bad people. And that's something that I think has been lost in this conversation, is that it's going to take everyone coming to the table, as Kate said, people from the racial justice community, but also people from the law enforcement community, people from the mental health communities coming together and coming up with solutions that are actually going to work here. Abolishing or defunding the police is the exact opposite of what we should be doing. If anything, some of the reforms that we are going to be pursuing are going to need more funding for increased training and various hiring the correctly trained people in police forces. But I've been a leader on this issue within my own party. Recently, I drafted and brought all the way through the process a resolution, anti-racism resolution within the Vermont Republican Party, which was actually co-authored by Senator Randy Brock and Senator Joe Benning. So I worked with those people, and it was a process. We had to give some back and forth, and I don't think we got everything in it that we originally wanted. But I was really happy to be a leader on this issue, and I think really move the issue forward and with a group of people who traditionally have been hesitant to talk about racial issues. So I would continue to do those types of things. These are uncomfortable conversations, but they're conversations that I think we all need to be having right now in order to make sure that everyone truly is equal in this country. So thank you.
Thank you. And Richard, your turn.
Thank you. I support the lives of Blacks, All-Americans, and law enforcement. For the actual organization Black Lives Matter, I do not support their fundamental philosophy of transforming America completely. A capitalist economy gives people the best opportunity for upward mobility. I will agree there may be racial issues within the state, but I think we need to look at it on a case-by-case basis. We can't just let these folks, if there's been inequality in what services they have gotten, it needs to be looked at and resolved.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, so let's have another round of you ask somebody else a question. There's a catch though, as I mentioned to you folks beforehand. This time around, you have to pose your question to somebody different than the person to whom you posed your first question. This round will start with Dan Noyes. Ask one of your opponents a question, Dan.
Muted. I'd like to ask Kate a question, please. Hey, Kate, in your opening statement, you talked a lot about coalition building and leadership. Can you give us some examples of how that would come into play if you were elected to the House of Representatives?
Sure. I mean, it would come into play, I think, I think any good bill that ultimately is passed requires a coalition to be built. And so in my mind, again, like I said early on, it's not just about what our opinions are, our vision is, it's about what our skill set is around being able to build relationships and bring people together. And I have a lot of experience in doing that. Professionally, as a social worker, when I was working in community mental health in St. Albans, I was asked to start an innovative program of incorporating mental health care professionals into primary care doctors' offices, and was able to implement one of the first of those programs in that region. And it was incredibly successful, which I don't know if you've ever worked in doctors' offices, but doctors have very particular ways they like to work. And so to be able to go in and to be able to build those relationships and make a system that worked and was really successful, it felt really good for me. It felt really good for the community. And now that's actually grown into quite large program that continues today. Similarly, the racial equity work that I was describing earlier, you know, building coalitions across multiple sectors with multiple people towards movement around an issue of racism is really challenging. These are hard things to talk about. And again, I think we've been able to do a lot of that good work in a short amount of time. And honestly, my you know, fundraising was brought up earlier. In terms of looking at my campaign, one of the things that I feel really proud of is over 100 individual contributions have been made to the campaign. And about 90 or so, I think of those are under $100 in terms of, and I haven't asked, you know, I announced my campaign and there was broad support and excitement among a lot of people who I've worked with, who I've gone to school with. And that's something that I really feel deeply grateful for, that people have stepped up in that way. And I feel like it's an indication of my ability to build relationships and coalitions. So thanks for the question.
Shayne, Spence, pose a question to somebody else.
Yeah, my question's for Kate, but I think she might have lost audio. It says she's connecting to audio. Kate, can you hear me? Yeah, I think she lost audio. I will wait until she's able to reconnect if she is.
Does anybody want, I can come back to you. Does anybody want to ask a question besides of somebody besides Kate?
I have one.
Okay, Richard, go ahead. Who would you like to ask your question of?
Yeah, this question's for Dan. You say you're focused on helping older Vermonters, but you have over the years in the legislatures that voted for increased taxes and spending, making it less affordable to live here. How is this helping them?
We haven't raised taxes. We haven't voted for any bills that we passed the balanced budget in the last 4 years that I've been there.
Richard, again, that was a 10-second answer. Would you care
Sorry. I didn't vote for any.
Or are you satisfied with that answer?
Well, the paid family leave program had taxes in it, didn't it?
Passed.
Sorry.
That was a tax that, yeah, fair enough. Yes, I did vote for paid family leave, and it did not become law. But in terms of the budget itself, we have not, in terms of the bigger budget. But that one, I stand corrected. Thank you.
So it was going to be Shayne's turn. Looks like Kate has her video back. Did you want to pose a question to her, Shayne?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. Kate, my question to you is actually, we were just talking about your fundraising. So it's in relation to that. 42% of your funds have come from outside of the state of Vermont. So I wanted to ask you, with the very particular district that you're running for, do you feel you're going to be able to represent them when so much of your support has come from people outside of Vermont?
Well, I guess first, I'm curious about those numbers. I'm not sure. I mean, I think I'm assuming that you're drawing those from campaign finance reports, which only show people who've contributed over $100. So I'm not sure if you're referring to people who've contributed over $100.
The campaign finance reports, the filing system on the Secretary of State's website allows you to look at the total amounts. I don't get any personal information, but it does, the system itself knows whether those are in-state or out-of-state contributions. And the system says that you got your 42% of your funding from outside of the state of Vermont.
Got it. So here's how my fundraising effort went. First of all, fundraising was something I was kind of nervous about. As I said, I was asked to run and I've never done this before. And so my birthday was the day before I was going to be announcing to the community that I was running. And I decided to put a post up on Facebook. And I put a post up on Facebook and I said, I've made this decision. I'm feeling super nervous and excited about it. I'm running for the Vermont House of Representatives. And within 2 hours, I had a text from someone who's helping me on the campaign, and they said, wow, great start with your fundraising. And within 2 hours, I'd raised $2,000. And again, when I think about my fundraising, I think about my gratitude for the fact that my community was that excited about the idea of me running. I don't know who you're referring to in terms of out-of-state people. I know many of the out-of-state people that I've received contributions from are my friends I grew up with in Vermont, who are doing amazing things out in the community and who are excited about the direction that Vermont could go if I were to be elected. Many of them are people who, you know, are invested in this state and consider moving back. You know, I don't know if you're trying to insinuate that there's some sort of outside tie that would pull me away from my community. I mean, I think what I can say is that I center my community in everything I do.
Thank you, Kate.
I find
That's
Mhm.
Thank you. And Kate, it's your turn to ask somebody else a question.
So Richard, I'm actually kind of curious about the question that Dan had asked in terms of how are you going to represent me, a queer person in your district. I have 2 young kids at home. I'm curious how you would represent me and others that fit my demographic in your district.
Sure, 90 seconds.
Well, again, I'm thinking that that the community you are from has, again, the same issues we have with everybody else. Taxes are too high. We need to figure out a way to lower taxes. We need to figure out how to shrink the government, the state government, get rid of regulations so that you folks can keep more of your own money and open up businesses without overburden regulations.
Is that it, Richard?
That's it.
That ends round 2 of you folks asking each other questions.
I will ask you a question. There have been increased calls for reallocation of funds for law enforcement agencies in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. Some say that police departments are being asked to respond to social service calls dealing with mental health, addiction, and homelessness, while agencies or organizations that are best equipped to handle those things are underfunded. If there's a limited amount of money to go around, how ought it be allocated in your view? And we're going to start with Shayne. You have, as soon as I open my phone, 2 minutes. And go ahead.
Yeah, well, you know, as I said earlier, there has been some progress that we in Vermont have made on this issue. I think we do a very good job of making sure that there are qualified mental health officials who are able to work with law enforcement agencies. You know, I just talked to a friend a little while ago who was going on a ride along with the Lamoille County Sheriff's Department. And, you know, she's there to be the first line of interaction with folks where you don't necessarily need a police officer there. So, but that is not funding that's going to her agency. That's funding that's going to the police department in a lot of cases across the state. So that's, you know, when I say that we can't be looking at defunding the police to answer this problem, you know, yeah, we actually probably do need more mental health workers, but they're going to need to be housed within a police force in most cases in order to streamline the whole operation. Otherwise, you're going to have, you know, the dispatch system is just going to be a lot more clunky when you have to rope in 4 or 5 different agencies rather than just the few that we already send out to every call. So there is absolutely limited money. And, you know, over time, I think we need to have more investment in mental health and substance use treatment and, you know, homelessness prevention. But in the short term, it's going to take police, and we can't, you know, rip it off like a Band-Aid and expect it to be better.
Thank you, Shayne. Richard, you are up next, and you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. I would tend to agree with Shayne on his outlook on that. We cannot cut the budgets for the police departments. We've seen areas where there may be issues with that the officer may need somebody from the mental health community to assist with a call, and tend to agree that we probably would have to fold those into the department. I see that we have, so I've heard some stories where there's in Burlington where they thought they'd try to defund some of the, remove some of the policemen in the department, and people in some areas of the city saying, well, we're already having a difficult time getting police down to where we are. We don't see that is a solution. So again, streamlining, putting these folks in with the police department could be a pretty good idea.
Okay, thank you very much. And Kate, you are up next, and you've got 2 minutes.
I'm sorry to do this. Do you mind repeating the question? I just want to make sure I hear the full question again.
Of course, yeah. So, we don't have a teleprompter in this, so you'll hear my papers rustling. There have been increased calls for reallocation of funds for law enforcement agencies in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. Some say that police departments are being asked to respond to social service calls dealing with mental health, addiction, or homelessness, while agencies or organizations that are best equipped to handle those things are underfunded. If there's a limited amount of money to go around, how ought it be allocated?
Yeah, thank you. This is a good question. And I want to start by saying that law enforcement plays an essential role in our communities. I am a mental health professional, and if you go back and you pull up the News and Citizen articles, recent News and Citizen articles that talk about almost any time over the last 5 years, if you pull up a News and Citizen article that talks about a desire to add on a new officer to the force in Morrisville, for example, almost universally in these articles, what they're saying is, what police officers and chiefs are saying is, the scope of our work is really different now. We're being asked more and more to come to the hospital and sit with people who are actively suicidal. And this is true. I know this to be true. I see it every single day. It is confusing to me that we would think about continuing to hire police officers into the force if it's true what's being often reported, which is that a lot of this time is now shifting into this role, when a first-year case manager coming in who's getting paid $30,000 a year or often less could do that job from the perspective of a mental health professional versus an officer coming in on the force making $80,000 to $90,000 a year. So in terms of reallocating and even just thinking about moving forward, I think we have to be really creative about how we're spending our money and what are the outcomes. We have to look at these things. It's really important to support mental health. Oh, sorry. Are we out of time?
Oh, you had 4 seconds to go, but
4 seconds to go. This isn't about supporting law enforcement or not supporting law enforcement, but it is about looking at what is working and what isn't working. And I think it makes sense to apply mental health services to mental health issues.
Thank you. Dan, we're going to end this
Thank you.
with you.
So in Lamoille County, our sheriff, Roger Marcoux, has been doing a really good job trying to figure out how to integrate and provide training to his sheriffs so that they know how to contact, to be that point of first contact, and how to refer people, and So I have to commend him for doing that. And I also know that within our state police, I was in a committee meeting in the Senate where they were talking about how they're really trying to roll out some more training to be more of a case manager and to understand where we can direct people who are in crisis or needing of services to get those services. I think if you look at what our sheriff's department has done with the Yellow House, the shelter in Hyde Park, and trying to work with those individuals and make sure that their law enforcement are really focusing on what they need to do and not having to have those extra skills, but also, having those skills to refer people to where they need to go. So I think the DAs are underfunded. If you look at Lamoille County Mental Health, it's just something that we're always trying to work on in the legislature is to make sure these agencies are adequately funded. And I know that one is not. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay. This will be our last question from the moderators. And the first question, this will go to Richard Bailey first. Richard, in 2014, then Governor Peter Scheuermann dedicated his entire State of the State address to the opioid crisis in Vermont. Made nationwide news about that. And here we are 6 years later. How do you think the state's done in stemming the tide in your communities? And what ideas do you have to further stem the tide of opioids in your communities? 2 minutes, please.
Well, I believe the system that was put in place by Governor Scheuermann and I believe carried on by Governor Scott, I believe are working. I'm, again, not that familiar with the issue, so I really do not think I can talk clearly and coherently about it. So I basically, this is all I'd have to say about it. I'm sorry.
You still have a minute and a half. Is that?
That's all I can offer right at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Next, and that is Kate Donnally. Do you need that? It was a long question. I'm sorry. Do you need it again?
Sure.
All right, so remember 6 years ago, the Governor Scheuermann gave his entire State of the State address about the opioid crisis in Vermont. I'm wondering how you think 6 years later the state has done in tackling the issue, and what would you do to further stem the tide of opioids in your communities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the state has done a pretty impressive job in many ways of organizing around the opioid crisis. Not the hub and spoke model in terms of allowing people immediate access to assessment and treatment has been really successful. In most cases, there's no waits. Now they're moving into allowing people to access assessment and medication-assisted treatments directly from the emergency departments. These are life-saving changes that have been made. And again, I was working in primary care when these changes were made and have been able to kind of see how it's rolled out internally. And it's been a really beautiful process across multiple spectrums. And I think a real example of success of working across different healthcare settings to support people living. I think in terms of, what I can say is it was only in the last couple of years that, I suffered a loss in my practice of someone due to overdose. There's incredible pain in this community every single day from people who are still suffering. And we need to continue to do more in order to support people. One, I think, is continuing to support trauma-informed care and across all settings. The other is really looking at points of transition. And this is something that I think Jenna's Promise locally is doing a really remarkable job of, is looking at these transitions into sobriety and trying to understand all these moments in time when people can lose access to their sobriety, housing, jobs. These are the kind of resources that we need to support people with moving forward.
And Noyes.
Great, thank you. You know, we've come a long way since then. The hub and spoke model has been successful in making sure people have access to treatment. It didn't exist back when Governor Scheuermann really, talked about this. We were a model in the country to really make sure people have access to treatment where they can move away from using opioids. We've also really started to look at different models in the legislature and through the Department of Health for education and prevention programs. And those are the ones where we really can utilize the small funding source that we have. Those are our least expensive treatment options, is to, reach upstream and get people before they become addicted or they become using these opioids. So the Icelandic model, which was has been really starting to roll, trying to think about how that's rolled out and making sure that we have access for that third space, the time after school, where our youth are not susceptible to, have something going on. So we made some really good investments in after school programs that really focus on that. I introduced legislation this last session that I'll just touch on briefly to allow prescribing psychotherapists to prescribe, and it allows someone who is in recovery or moving into recovery to work with one individual who's can prescribe Suboxone or so I want to see how that moves in this upcoming legislative session, and just leave it at that. Something I've been working on.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, Shayne, Spence. Same question to you, sir.
Could you repeat it again? I'm not sure I remember exactly what it is.
So the governor, Scheuermann, dedicated his entire State of the State State of the State address to the opioid crisis in 2014. 6 years later, how do you think the state has done in tackling the problem, and what would you do to help further stem the tide of opioids in your communities?
Yeah, I actually very much remember that speech. I was there on the floor, and I remember seeing just across party lines, everybody in the room standing up and applauding that speech, which was, quite an incredible thing to see in a partisan body. I think a lot of the progress we've made on the issue has been positive. Others have mentioned the hub and spoke model that has been set up. Something that has happened more recently is the expansion of the recovery coaching program. Recently, I became a recovery coach. And so that's something that I definitely want to see expanded even further. I think, especially in rural areas, having a peer-to-peer connection is one of the best things that we can offer folks who are trying to get themselves out of this dark hole. But I think something that Dan said actually is right on. This is something that we need to address the root causes of, and not just deal with the symptoms. And I think the root cause of this is economic. I think that for a lot of young Vermonters, the people who are most susceptible to getting addicted, they don't see much hope and opportunity in staying in Vermont these days. 24% of 18 to 24-year-olds are living in a household that's experiencing poverty in Vermont. So this is something where, when young people are thinking about whether they want to start their lives here, whether they want to start a business here or start a family here, there's a lot of reasons not to. And so, those folks either leave in search of opportunity elsewhere, or they stay here in what they, may see as a destitute situation. So I think if we address that lack of hope and opportunity out there in the economy, I think we address the substance use issue in a large degree.
Thank you, Shayne.
All right. It doesn't seem possible, but we have reached closing statements. So we're going to go in reverse order, reverse alphabetical order this time. Shayne, you're going to lead us off, and you have just 1 minute.
I'm echoing a little bit. Thanks again to Tommy and Jesse and to News and Citizen for putting this on for us tonight. It's been a great opportunity to speak directly to voters in a way that, you know, we haven't really been able to throughout this COVID campaign cycle. It's been a new experience for everybody here, and I know for all of you who are watching at home, trying to figure out how you can engage with your government going forward. I can promise you that if I'm elected, I will be engaged. I will be available and receptive to the concerns you have and the things you want to say. Again, if you are interested in learning more information, please go to my website at shaynespence.com. Shayne is how you spell my first name. My parents were a little tricky with that one. But feel free to reach out to me. All my contact info is on there, and I hope to earn your vote on November 3rd or anytime before that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I had to look at my sheet to see the reverse alphabetical. Sorry. It's harder backwards. Dan, you are up next. And
Great, thank you.
A minute.
You've heard over the course of the last hour and 15 minutes about my work in the legislature, my beliefs and ideas to make sure rural Vermont is not forgotten. I will continue to build on these ideas and initiative that I have worked on over the past 4 years. I look forward to where the Older Vermonter Act takes us and how we develop and implement a Vermont plan on successful aging. I wanted to continue to advocate for programs like Jenna's Promise and strengthen our education and prevention and recovery programs for those with substance use disorder, and make sure that NVU is accessible, strong, and vibrant for years to come. I am deeply concerned about the advocacy to build on my relationships and partner with my colleagues to make sure Lamoille County has the resources needed to come out the other side of this pandemic stronger and more resilient. I ask for your vote, and as always, if you have any questions about my candidacy or state government, please reach out. I can be reached at 802-730-7171, or my email is dnoyes@leg.state.vt.us. Thank you.
I'm allowing everyone a little bit of extra time for internet lag. If your internet lags, we're not going to hold it against you. All right, Kate, 1 minute on the clock.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for making this possible, and just take a moment to say thank you to everyone in the community. Like I said before, I think this campaign, I had a deep love for this community before I started the campaign. It's part of why I decided to run, and that has only deepened in the course of connecting with the community. We have incredible people in this area, and I'm so grateful to all of them for their commitments to making our communities as incredible as they are, and I look forward to working together towards moving them into the future. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And our final speaker of the evening, Richard Bailey, 1 minute on the clock for you. Go ahead.
Thanks again to Tommy and Jesse and the News and Citizen for hosting tonight's debate. As Shayne said, it's been difficult to reach out to folks during these trying times. We're going to have some tough financial and budget issues in the next legislative session and years to come. We cannot continue down the same path of increased taxes and overspending. We need to have more balance in the legislature. My candidacy will bring that balance. My goals, which I'll work toward, are as follows: working with Governor Scott on his affordability agenda, limiting government growth and spending, lowering taxes and removing burdensome regulations, which slows economic growth. Now that Governor Scott has opened up the economy, I opened up the economy a little more. Additional thanks I want to send out to the restaurants and the tourist industry for getting ready for the holiday season and the winter skiing season. And I also want to send out thanks to the construction crews that are trying to get our roads in order before winter hits. I appreciate the fact that they're getting these roads redone, even though it does cause a lot of stress to a lot of people, but we need these roads done so we can get the tourists in here when they're in an easy, reasonable fashion. Once again, I'd like to ask you for your vote on November 3rd, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all of you for a lovely debate, lively debate. There was a lot of heady and thoughtful answers in the last hour and a half. For anybody who's watching us on the live stream, we're going to take a 15-minute break or so. The next debate between the candidates in the Lamoille-2 House district will start at 7:45. Candidates, good luck on your campaign trail. I know that it's difficult to not be able to go door to door, and it really is difficult for us to not be able to, to host you in some high school auditorium like we've done in the past. And let's all get this together. Be safe out there and be good to each other. Take care. Good.